best scenario I saw for myself living in the dark was to keep everything a secret. Because if I kept everything a secret, no one would get hurt.
One day I finally figured out how messed up I was, so I went and got help. Yeah, no. Some of us are too broken to even think that far outside of ourselves. So a lot of us have to get caught in one way or the other. And that is a great and terrifying grace.
It was like taking a drug. There was this unbelievable guilt and shame and associated with it, but at the same time I felt this high.
I feel this sense that something is uniquely wrong with me. I always felt that God was mildly disgusted with me.
Hearing that he loves me didn't really resonate because it's like when it's all said and done, he's still gonna judge me.
Man, no matter what you did to clean yourself up, to look good, to play the right parts, to say the right things, shame was always there to tell you that you're bad. And when you're bad, God doesn't love you. He doesn't want to have anything to do with you. You have to earn that love.
Shame is that thing that drives my compulsive behavior.
I was a slave to it. That's when it clicked.
Lust is desire gone mad. So every man, every woman struggles with lust. Eventually we begin to face it's an addiction. It's going to kill us. So often we think God is just trying to get us to conform, when really what he's committed to is unbelievable transformation. If we could only enter the depths of his love, we would find our lives deeply changed.
He loves us, oh, how he loves us, oh, how.
When the prodigal hits the bottom, something can grow. Nothing's so dead. God can't grow something living in it.
He loves.
Welcome back to the Pirate Monk Podcast. We've been talking for the last couple of weeks about the Heart of Man movie, showing nationwide, one night only on the 14th of September. And we're fortunate to have with us on today's episode of the podcast the producer of the film, a guy who showed me some of the early rushes a couple years ago, Jason Pamer, joining us from Seattle. Hey, Jason.
Hey, guys.
Now, Jason, you're producer. Weren't you also writer, co-director?
Yeah, I wrote the film with the director as well, so producer, writer, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. Take us back, will you, Jason, to the genesis of the film. Where was the germ of this idea? And is the finished product what you set out to film, or did it mutate over time?
So I was on a film called Rape for Profit. This was a film on sex trafficking in a major U.S. city, specifically the demand side. And as we kind of got into the demand side, we discovered that pornography use was a huge factor in moving the demand toward the buying of illicit sex on the streets of Seattle. And so that was a 3-year journey, and Jada Pinkett Smith, Will Smith's wife, came on to executive produce that, and we released it in theaters in 2012. And it was on the heels of that, as we were trying to figure out what's next. In that in-between season, I had some mentors in the city kind of go, well, what about the guys in that film?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't care. I mean, it's about the girls.
Yeah.
And they kind of graciously said, okay, and then didn't say anything else. And then I got connected to a guy named Tony Anderson who founded a thing called Unearthed. And he, at the time, was filming The Hearts of Men all over the world, Southeast Asia, South Africa, same premise, the demand side of trafficking, what drives men to this illicit sexual behavior. The thing is, God kind of gave him a vision at one point of a tree in the middle of a village, and the fruit was growing from the tree, and the villagers were grabbing and eating it, and it was poisoning them, and their bodies were piling up underneath the tree, and the villagers kept clamoring over each other to get to the fruit. And as they clamored for more and more fruit came. And eventually God kind of penned the vision down to the roots, and in the roots were the hearts of men. He said, until you go get me the hearts of men, the fruit will never change. That illicit, in whatever category, will always be there if the hearts of men aren't dealt with and spoken to.
Yeah.
And so that kind of began, and right around that time was when we got connected. So it was a pivot from, okay, this is sort of a behavior level film that is kind of what we did with Right for Profit.
Mhm.
And now we were interested in going deeper.
Yeah.
And so it took our collective teams a journey. And the film we have today is not the film we set out to make.
Mhm.
I think it's the film we were supposed to make.
Yeah.
I think, to be honest, if we didn't release it for another year, it would still evolve. It's just like this fine wine. It keeps marinating and it keeps evolving and fermenting, and more voices that speak into it. Guys like you, Nate, honestly, and as we listen and read more and just are in deeper relationship with guys like Trueface, I think we come to a greater understanding of the love of God, the gospel, and I think that has had material impact on the way we cut this film, and it would look different in a year.
Now, we talked about it a little last week. Just quality wise, it's a beautiful journey, and it's a journey that didn't require dialogue to tell the story, which is an interesting choice. I mean, it made me think of Black Stallion first with that huge 45-minute scene or whatever.
Yeah.
Kid on the island, and Castaway that has these. That was a bold decision.
Wilson, God, I love Wilson. Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, part of when we were writing, we were like, this could go cheesy real quick to try to represent this cosmic, ancient father-son relationship. You don't even have a full film to do it, so you now have half a film. In half a film, those lines are going to require too much weight to them to convey what we're hoping to convey, and that we felt like that was going to be really difficult to walk that line in an artistic way. And so then we kind of went, okay, well, if they're not talking, how are they connected? How do you show connection, relationship? This is where the violin came in, and the melody of the violin, and the developing of the melody over a lifetime. It was a risk, and it was one, honestly, like, we've had enough feedback now to know it's worked, but I did not know if it was going to work even until, I would say, last fall, when we released it to the 8,000 people that supported the film financially. I didn't know. Like, is it going to resonate, or is it going to be so weird? Is it paced well enough? Or these are all things that we were worrying about, thinking about. To be honest, I'm still concerned about it. But
so the story, you've got this violin story, you've got the prodigal son. Give the listeners a little something. What are they going to be walking into on September 14th when they find their local theater that's showing?
Yeah, so there's a ladybug on me. Is this an outtake? There's a ladybug on me. I'm not a bug guy. So it's a dual genre film. It's a deconstructed look at the prodigal son story. It's a narrative that we shot in Hawaii. And then it's interviews of real people talking about their addiction, their vices, the heart of the father, the face of the father for them in the midst of all that, the hope that found them there in their darkest places. So we combine these two genres. The narrative is sort of the visuals for the doc, and the doc is sort of the language of the narrative.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, the way you've woven it together just transfixed me. And to me, the great value of the film is I think it's going to be an icebreaker that makes it possible to initiate deep conversation that is desperately needed. It'll help to kind of ease us into waters that we've avoided because they're difficult to navigate. And we've got wonderful people kind of modeling vulnerability and confession and offering experience, strength, and hope. And I think it does everything that great film is supposed to do. Yeah.
Thanks for saying that. Our hope is that the narrative gives a container for your story to be held in, whatever story that is. And that the doc, like you said, gives you an example of what vulnerability can look like and mean. And it's not all neat and tidy. And the reality is there were some stories we filmed that didn't wrap up nicely. And with 72 minutes to leave some ends loose, it's possible. It didn't feel right in this film, but we want people to know that, we don't want to cast more judgment or shame on couples who are still wrestling, right? Or on that woman whose marriage did not come back together, or because these are all realities that we walk in and we walk with friends. And so, our hope is that just people get a better glimpse of the Father, and that there's freedom from shame and the lies that we've all listened to and believed over time. And that slowly the voice of the Father, that volume, that melody can get louder in our ear.
Yeah.
How did that fit with kind of that the typical Christian movie that creates a problem that's supposed to transcend people's lives and connect with them, but so often at the end of the movie, everything works out exactly the way they hoped it would and feared God would show up. Like, it has to have the bow, or else it doesn't represent the Christian faith somehow.
Right. Totally wrong. Not representative of any of our lives. Don't understand why we think representing on the screen reflects reality. I will say, audiences in general, you and I included, when we go to a film, there needs to be some level of hope at the end. I don't think any of us could name a film, although I challenge you to, that ends with just darkness and sort of is just, wow, all right. There are some that are darker for sure. And I think what you're talking about is not tying up every bow. And that's in our film, I won't give away too much, but you see the prodigal still going back to similar places in his journey, even at the very end. He still bears the scars of his decisions. We didn't remove those scars. Like, those are realities. Those are reminders of the story and places we've been in our story. So I agree. I don't like it when it wraps it up. I think it's disingenuous. You become a Christian, you win the state title. It's like, that's not really how life is.
Yeah. The one that comes to mind is the unnamed film where the woman couldn't have a child throughout the movie, and then miraculously at the end, once God comes through, everything works out for everybody, and she's pregnant. And I just felt bad for every woman that doesn't get that ending and has to still find out God is good and she's not going to have a baby.
Yeah. Are you talking about Mary? Don't name the film. I agree with you. I agree. It does not give an accurate sense of what this journey is like. There's tremendous beauty to be had. There's tremendous pain. And many times it's the same relationships, the same moments in time that carry those same realities.
So how did you end up in this place? Because I know my time spent in Los Angeles in that world, I found it very
encouraging,
exhausting at a heart level to participate in things that you're still in. So how did you decide, hey, I want to make films with this level of purpose, but I can also navigate this world without having my heart sucked dry?
I think there's a couple of realities. One, my wife is a protector of my heart and soul and mind, and I mean that in every sense of the word. I've wanted to quit this film 3 times, 3 distinct times, probably hundreds more. And she was the one to say, "You're not done on this thing. We're not done on this thing." So she keeps me very grounded. Like, I could come back from a trip and have some of the craziest meetings and opportunities, and she's like, "Can you hold the kid?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So, and just immediately brings me back to like a place of groundedness. A, B, I actually live in Seattle. My producing partner shoulders the brunt of all those realities in LA. I'm able to fly in and out every month. There's that. So there's a couple graces, I think, that I experienced that. And then, we've been really blessed on this film with an incredible group of executive producers that are highly activated. Brian Bird, who's an industry vet, 35-year guy, wrote Case for Christ, Captive, lots of TV, tremendous storyteller. And he's on calls with me every week. And then Bruce McNichol from Phoenix, True Face, he's one of our executive producers, and he's also on calls with me every week. There's just a really great covering of expertise. There's a sageness to our EP team. There's a covering there, I think. So my hope is that as I keep moving through film and more films, hopefully, I keep grabbing this intergenerational team to learn from the guys that have stepped into some areas that they're like, you could walk there. It's not going to be as fun as it might look right now,
Yeah. Hey, Jason, could you take us on to location in Hawaii and just kind of describe for some of those scenes? First of all, the cinematography is just fantastic.
Yeah.
The scenes around the tip. Tell us about the group of actors and what it was like to shoot those narrative pieces on location.
It was so fun. So fun. We were scouting for months before we landed there, all up and down Central Coast in California to try to find an area that felt wild and adventurous, that could be a place that we could kind of put this timeless setting in. And we looked at Ireland. We just looked all around the place, and we settled on the big island of Hawaii. And there was tremendous production support on the ground there through a group, Big Island Gigs, and a few other groups. They're tangentially connected to YWAM's base over there, with their professional crews. And so we got connected through relationship. We did a scout, and literally every location we went on the scout fit the script perfectly. It was like, oh, we don't need to go to location 2. Like, this is it. And that's a testament to our guy over there, Joe Engel. He did a great job finding great spots. But it was what it was. The set design and the production design budget didn't need to be as big because we were in these places. And so it was incredibly fun. We shot for about 2 weeks. We had about a week and a half of prep. So we were on the island almost a month. And, the prodigal, we cast him actually in Hawaii. He's from Atlanta, Justin Torrance. Incredibly gifted guy. I mean, he embodied so many different people's stories in one performance. I think that's one of the most incredible things. Did all his own stunts, including the cliff. Yeah, he was amazing. I actually work with him pretty closely to this day just because I love his heart, his intensity, his excellence. Cast the father out of LA. We had a big casting call for the father. Hundreds and hundreds of people responded to the casting call there, and ended with Robert Fleet. He does a fantastic job again of a pretty daunting task to represent this figure. No lines, all in the face and the eyes. Just acting with your body, So it was fun. We had a crew of about 40 or 50 people over there. Some friends of mine walking downtown. I'm in the middle of a podcast. I have respect. Sorry, guys. Can you guys edit that? You can do it in post. That's what people always tell me.
Sure we will.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Sorry, guys. I didn't mean to screw it up for you. Yeah, it was incredible. We had just a big crew over there that was so fun to work with. I mean, we threw a luau of sorts before we shot anything. I had my first assistant director, Joth Riggs, is an industry vet, was on Starship Troopers and just major films over the last 25, 30 years in Hollywood. He's like, I've never seen a crew honored this way or celebrated this way before you shot one day. And I think that was our hope. Was we had long days, 17, 18-hour days, packing into the middle of nowhere a lot of times in jungles. And it was a thing. We got the best from everybody. I think it was because we really attempted to love on people, and that's how we tried to run this whole process. We've not been perfect, but we try to put people above process, people above timeline, people above motorcycles.
Yeah.
Now, I was supposed to ask you, Nate said, make sure you ask how much this thing cost, because you'll be surprised. And he didn't want to give it away.
Yeah, so it was raised, the film was made on about $1.2 million of donations. Generous people from around the world. Again, about 8,000 people gave to this thing over the course of the last 3-4 years, even beyond that for the Hearts of Men 1.0. It's got a value much higher. I mean, we didn't have to cut corners, but through some really strategic relationships, like with my producing partner in LA, he owns the best gear in the industry. That camera department rental alone for that amount of time would have been a third of the amount of money we spent, a fourth of the amount of money we spent total. We spent way less than that. So there's this example. We had a customized drone. It was one of the first few drones that was FAA approved, and so it allowed us to not have to go rent helicopters.
Yeah.
To get all the
I was
shots.
wondering about those. Those shots. Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a drone. It was a lot of money in the air. It was over $100,000 in the air between the drone, the camera, lens. And so that cliff scene was intense. I mean, we're all on walkies, and the first AD is, we got to get this. And the drone operator's like, we got 5 minutes left in the air to get this. And Jens and I are looking at this floating over the Pacific and looking at the rocks below, just going, oh my God. I'm getting on the phone with the insurance broker in LA going, hey, we're going to have to up these limits. But they got it. They got it with like a minute left in the air, and Justin did it in one take. But that allowed us to get that production quality and value, because one of the big inspirations for the visuals was Terrence Malick's Tree of Life. And we just wanted to give, this is what we have access to. And what we think is better is actually not better. What we have, the fullness of relationship with my wife is better than the illicit porn in the other
Yes.
room. It's harder, it's messier, it's more frustrating, but it's so much more dense and rich and textured.
Yeah.
Relationship with my brothers, when we piss each other off and we disagree and we're going at it, to stay in that moment and fight through that, to be known, even at my worst, is more difficult but more beautiful on the other end. And so we were trying to illustrate that through the visuals.
I think two things that it did for me when I was watching it. You have the interviews, and if it was just the interviews, it would have conveyed an important point. But because my heart got to take a break between the interviews and kind of breathe in that beauty, and also the other story that was not didactic, that you didn't need to spoon feed me. It kind of prepared me for, okay, give me the next bit of information. And it was really like breathing in and breathing out throughout. And
what a great way to describe it.
And the fact that it was really God's canvas that was on display as much as anything else. You've got the story going on, but it can't be overstated. This seeing God's fingerprints throughout in His creation.
Love
you know
that.
what? I think this is a landmark film, really, in the history of Christian popular art. I think people are going to look back and say something changed in Christian art with Heart of Man.
Wow.
I really do.
Gonna need to get that in writing, Nate.
So, on that note, people watch movies all the time, and probably don't think a lot about the people behind the scenes. I got to be a producer once, and it was the most tedious thing for a very short project. It was unbelievably tedious. Most people understand kind of the heart of the artist as they're creating what's going to come up on the screen. So peel back the veil a little bit, because you're the man who's going through the practical and got a vision for what they're going to encounter.
Yeah. I mean, this is going to sound cliche, and it's true in everything we do, but team is so important. I mean, the director, Eric Esau, has been a lifelong friend of mine, and I don't know probably anybody more detail-oriented than him, and yet carries such a great imagination and just childlikeness. And so he poured his heart and soul, and still to this day, I mean, I'm getting text on notes. We're editing this thing. We have to deliver it next week, which will be just a few weeks before the release. And it's still being tweaked. The VFX is still being worked on. The moments in the film are still being worked on. So he was great. My producing partner, Jens, none of this happens without Jens. He's poured his heart and soul in every possible conceivable way. There's just so many people to name. I mean, I think I've hired probably close to 150 people on this thing. And this is an indie doc, it's kind of like, it's a hybrid. And we shot a narrative, but I mean, it's incredible. We had a full string section in Eastern Europe that brought the music to life. I mean, that's a whole nother podcast on how the sonic world of the film, which in many ways is the language of the film, through melody, came to life. These 40 string players over there that brought this picture vibrancy. So anyways, just a tremendous, tremendous team. And, staying power. It'll be 4 years for me by the time this film comes out. And this has consumed probably 80 plus 90% of my life the last 4 years. So it's been a lot. And you need those people around you to encourage you that it's worth it. And when you get to the first cut and go, oh my God, this is the worst thing that's ever been cut in the history of cinema. And then you spend 90 cuts to get to the place where we are today. And then you get the emails we get and the responses we get. It's a whole other podcast. I don't believe it. I almost think that there's some fake server out there that's just sending responses in because it's just like, there's no way it moved you like that. I'm a little cynical to it now, but it continues to transform. And I think that's a heavy word, and I think it's overused, but I think it actually is true. Like it's renewing marriages. I mean, it's just crazy what the film's doing.
Yeah.
So is one of the differences as a disciple of Jesus making art, that as you're doing this, the art is not as central in your mind as the people who will be transformed by the art?
No, I think art comes first. I love to quote Martin Luther. There's this German cobbler around the same time he was around, and he kind of went to Martin Luther and said, how can I be a good Christian shoemaker? And Martin Luther's response was, well, you don't need to put little crosses on it. Just make great shoes. Like, just make great shoes, and that'll be the way that you become a good Christian cobbler. And I think for us, there are contemporaries of mine that have had tremendous success in the film space. I think they approach it a little bit differently. It's, again, not trying to overgeneralize, but like, what is the message we want to get across, and how do we put a story around that message? Okay, the end of this film needs to kind of be like an altar call. Could be in the forest, could be, whatever. How are we going to do that? And then they kind of craft the story around it. And for me, it's like story is king, and in this art form, story is the most important thing. I think, a macro reality is people, obviously, at the end of the day, but it takes great people to make great story. And so story is essential. I don't think you can sacrifice the art on the altar of, transformation or whatever. I think it becomes a different form of art. I'm not going to say it's not art, because it is. It's just a different form. And I don't feel like I am called, even my broader team is called to that form of art. The greatest movies, that have moved me, Gladiator, Les Mis, Count of Monte Cristo, nobody would be like, oh my God, that was so didactic. That was so religious. And yet these are some of the greatest examples of the gospel that have ever made it to the silver screen. I mean, some of the greatest examples. And yet they're profound. They're powerful. They're entertaining. I think the medium of film demands that it's entertaining. If it's not entertaining, you've got something else. It's not art. It's something else.
Right. So how many films is this, or how many theaters is this going to be shown at on the release date?
Well, right now we're in almost 600 around the country, every major city, every DMA. And it's so fun. 7 p.m. in every time zone. And one night from now, if we can get to a certain ticket threshold, they'll put us up for another night or two. But that's what we're driving toward right now. September 14th, 7 p.m. This is the type of film you watch. You think about somebody that needs to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, this person, this would be the hope, would be that people would go in group and community. Go get a drink, go grab some food after, keep processing it.
So how do people find out what the closest theater is to them?
So if you go to heartofmanmovie.com/tickets, just put in your zip code, we'll pop up all the theaters around you. heartofmanmovie.com/tickets.
Okay.
Put in your zip code, and it'll take you to a theater list by you.
Okay. I will stick that in the description of this podcast, as well as a link to the trailer, so that you can kind of get a little glimpse of what you'll be in for.
And let me tell you guys, don't procrastinate on getting these tickets. Tom Mocha and I were just in Minneapolis yesterday talking with the Samson guys there. It's showing in 4 theaters in greater Minneapolis, and the word that those guys have is that it's selling out quickly. They're going as a group. We're going as a group here in Franklin, Tennessee. They're going as a group in Jackson, Mississippi. If you are listening to this podcast, you are in a group, make sure you get your guys together and go to the film. Do it the way we do it. If you can, do dinner and a movie, and then some hang time afterwards.
Yeah.
If you don't have a group, here's a great way to get one started. People. And if you need help getting a block of group tickets, shoot us a note quickly here at samsonpodcast@gmail.com. We'll help you get that done.
And hey, don't we have some giveaways on this?
We do. Actually, we've got 5 pairs of tickets to give away to Heart of Man.
Come on.
How are we going to decide who gets them, Aaron?
I want to include Jason in this. I think the first 5 people to send us an email to piratemonkpodcast@gmail.com with, Jason, what do they need to write to us, these first 5 people, to get these pairs of tickets? Because it's like gold.
Jason,
Giving away gold.
Jason, you're a good-looking guy. I can't wait to see the film. I imagine it's going to be the best thing I've ever seen.
All right,
something along those lines. Could be in Spanish.
We're going to call that option A. So option B, though, is going to be?
I think just name a few people that you're thinking of that need to see this with you, and I think just show us that you want to experience this in community.
There
And
you
then
go.
there's experience it in community.
That's great.
You could include part of Part A in it, of course. I mean, you don't have to go just with B. You can do a little mix.
You can put friends' initials if you're going to tell us why you think they need it. You know, let's still keep some confidentiality, unless you think it would be motivating for us to read their name on the next podcast why they ought to go.
Oh,
All
man.
right.
So thankful
Jason,
for you guys.
thank you so much, man.
Yeah.
It's,
Nate, love you, man. Thank you for what you and Samson Society mean for this film. To me personally, I think many, many people, men and women, will experience freedom because of your life, your story, how you've stewarded it, the men that you brought around you, the way you live. So love you. Thank you guys for this opportunity.
Okay. Love you, Jason. Lord bless you, man.
And we will be right back here on the Pirate Monk podcast.
Er war ein Punker und er lebte in der großen Stadt. Es war ihm